The bronze statue stood silent in the October rain, water streaming down the Virgin's outstretched arms like tears. But what happened here 3 days ago had shaken more than just the faithful of Millbrook College. It had cracked open questions that rational minds preferred to leave buried. Questions that would soon tear apart everything Marcus Chen believed about reality itself. Marcus adjusted his philosophy textbook under his arm, watching the small crowd of protesters gathered around St. Catherine's Chapel. Their signs read, "Respect all beliefs," and "Faith is not violence." He almost smiled at the irony. If they only knew the violence he'd witnessed in the name of faith, they might understand why he'd done what he did. If they knew what had happened to his mother 13 years ago in a church in Beirut, they might applaud his defiance rather than condemn it. Before we begin, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps share more testimonies of grace and transformation with those who need hope most. "Still can't believe you actually kicked it," whispered Jake Morrison, his roommate, catching up from behind. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air. "Half the campus thinks you're insane. The other half thinks you're a hero. The philosophy department is split down the middle." Marcus didn't feel like either. 3 sleepless nights had left him hollow, haunted by something he couldn't name. The statue's face kept appearing in his dreams, not angry or accusing, but infinitely sad. And there was something else, something that made his hands shake when he thought about it too long. A presence he'd felt standing behind him as he walked away from the chapel that night, following him across the quad, disappearing only when he'd reached his dorm room. "Professor Chen?" A young woman approached hesitantly, her press badge catching the pale sunlight. "I'm Sarah Kim from the campus newspaper. Could I ask you a few questions about what happened 3 nights ago?" Marcus tensed. The last thing he needed was more publicity. The video of his confrontation with the statue had already gone viral on social media, spawning dozens of think pieces about atheism, religious tolerance, and generational conflict. "There's nothing to discuss. I exercised my right to protest religious superstition. But witnesses say you seemed different afterward. That you stayed by the statue for almost an hour, just staring. Some students reported that you were crying." The memory hit him like cold water. He had stayed, though he couldn't explain why. Something about the way the bronze seemed to shimmer in the fading light, as if it were breathing, as if the metal contained something alive and watchful. "That's ridiculous," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. Sarah's eyes sharpened. She had the instincts of a born investigator. "Is it true your mother was killed in a church bombing in Lebanon when you were 12? Marcus froze. His carefully constructed walls began to tremble. The old wound, never properly healed, throbbed with fresh pain. "Who told you that?" "Public records. Your family fled to Canada, then the US. Your father's interviews with refugee services mention how you stopped speaking for 6 months after the attack, how you refused to enter any religious building for years." "Enough." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "My personal history has nothing to do with this." But it did, and they both knew it. The church bombing that killed his mother and 17 other worshippers had been carried out by extremists who claimed divine mandate. Faith had murdered his family, scattered his childhood like ash. Every prayer he'd heard since felt like a betrayal of her memory. Every religious symbol, a reminder of the cross that had been spray-painted on their apartment door 3 days before the bombing. Jake touched his arm. "Marcus, maybe we should go." As they walked away, Sarah called after them. "There's something else, Professor Chen." The security camera from that night shows something strange. Something the police can't explain. Something that might change everything you think you know about what happened. Marcus stopped dead. "What are you talking about?" "The timestamp shows you left the statue at 6:47 p.m. But there's another figure on the tape. A woman in white, standing next to it until 7:15. The strange thing is, she doesn't appear on any other camera, not entering, not leaving. Just there." "And Marcus?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. She's looking directly at the camera, as if she knows someone will be watching. Dr. Helena Rodriguez had seen brilliant students break down before, but never quite like this. Marcus Chen sat across from her desk, usually sharp eyes now hollow and unfocused. His philosophy papers had been getting stranger too. Dense arguments about the nature of religious experience that seemed to be wrestling with something intensely personal. Where once his writing had been coolly analytical, now it carried an undercurrent of desperate searching. "You missed my seminar on Kierkegaard yesterday," she said gently. "That's not like you. You've never missed a class in 3 years." Marcus stared at his hands. The same hands that had struck the statue, that had trembled afterward with what he'd told himself was adrenaline, but felt more like electricity. "I've been having trouble sleeping. The incident at the chapel?" He laughed bitterly. "Everyone keeps calling it an incident. I kicked a statue, that's all. People kick things every day. Why is this any different? Because you don't. In 3 years, you've been one of my most disciplined students. Your thesis on the evolutionary psychology of religious belief was groundbreaking. It's being considered for publication in the Journal of Consciousness Studies." "So what changed?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Outside Dr. Rodriguez's office window, students hurried across the quad, their voices carrying on the wind. Normal life continued while his own world tilted off its axis. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Have you ever experienced something that completely contradicted everything you believed about reality?" Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. This wasn't academic anymore. This was a student in crisis, and she'd seen enough of them to recognize the signs. "What kind of experience, Marcus?" "Nothing." Forget I said anything. Marcus stood abruptly, chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I should go. I have Dennett's new book to review for the Graduate Journal." "Marcus, wait!" She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a worn leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. "When I was your age, I went through something similar. A crisis of certainty. Maybe this will help." He took the journal reluctantly. On the cover, in faded gold letters, "Letters to a Doubting Mind, a Philosopher's Journey Through the Unknown." "Your journal?" "My professor's, Dr. Margaret Thornfield. She gave it to me when I was questioning everything I thought I knew about consciousness and experience. When I was convinced that either I was losing my mind or the world was far stranger than I'd ever imagined. Sometimes the most rational thing we can do is admit the limits of our rationality." Marcus clutched the journal tighter than he meant to. "Dr. Rodriguez, what if someone told you they'd seen something impossible? Something that challenged not just their beliefs, but their sanity? What if they had evidence, objective evidence, but that evidence itself was impossible?" I'd tell them that impossible is often just another word for unprecedented, and that sanity isn't about having all the answers. It's about staying curious enough to keep asking questions, even when those questions lead us into uncomfortable territory. Dr. Rodriguez watched as Marcus left, noting the way he held the journal like a lifeline. She'd given similar advice to other students over the years, but something about Marcus's particular crisis felt different, more urgent, as if whatever he was grappling with would either destroy him or transform him beyond recognition. Marcus read Dr. Rodriguez's professor's journal until 3 a.m., his coffee growing cold as he absorbed entries that seemed to mirror his own struggle with unsettling precision. Day 47. The rational mind is a fortress, but what happens when something appears that cannot be explained away? Do we expand our understanding, or do we close our eyes and pretend we saw nothing? Today, I experienced something that challenges every assumption I've held about the nature of reality. Day 62. Met with Dr. Patterson today. He insists my visions are trauma responses, neural misfiring triggered by grief over my mother's death. But trauma doesn't explain the external verifications. Other witnesses, changes in physical environment, documented phenomena that existed independent of my perception. If this is madness, it's madness with disturbingly objective components. Marcus closed the journal, frustrated. Academic speculation was one thing, but he needed facts, real answers, objective verification of what he'd experienced. He opened his laptop and pulled up the campus security portal, using his philosophy department credentials to access the footage Sarah had mentioned. The timestamp read October 15th, 6:30 p.m. There he was, approaching the statue with purpose, anger radiating from his body language like heat waves. The footage was crystal clear, shot from multiple angles. 6:47 p.m. He kicked the statue's base, the impact clearly visible, the sound probably audible if the cameras recorded audio. Students scattered like startled birds. He stood there afterwards staring, his posture gradually shifting from defiant to confused to something else. Fear, wonder, recognition. 6:47 p.m. He walked away, disappearing from frame, his movement jerky and uncertain. Marcus forwarded to 7 p.m., expecting empty footage. Instead, his blood ran cold. A figure stood beside the statue. Tall, graceful, wearing flowing white that seemed to move independently of any wind. The woman's face was turned away from the camera initially, but as Marcus watched, she slowly rotated to look directly at the lens. Her features were sharp, Mediterranean perhaps, with dark hair that fell to her shoulders in soft waves. Her expression was neither angry nor sad, but intensely focused, as if she were looking through the camera directly at whoever might be watching. She remained perfectly still for 28 minutes, then simply vanished. Not walking away, not moving out of frame, just gone between 1 second and the next, as if she had never been there at all. Marcus replayed the sequence 12 times. The timestamp was continuous. No cuts, no edits. The woman appeared on no other camera in the area, though the chapel was covered by 6 different angles, and the security system was state-of-the-art, installed just 2 years ago after a series of campus thefts. His hands shook as he took screenshots. This was impossible. Hallucinations didn't appear on security cameras. Group hallucinations didn't leave digital footprints. But the alternative, that something genuinely unexplainable had occurred, threatened everything he'd built his identity around. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The truth isn't always what we want it to be. Meet me at the chapel tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. Bring the journal. You'll understand why soon enough. A friend who knows what you're going through. Marcus stared at the message. Every rational instinct told him to delete it, to forget the footage, to focus on his studies. But curiosity, the same trait that made him a good philosopher, wouldn't let him rest. And something else, something deeper than intellectual interest, was pulling him toward that chapel. He would go. But he would also bring the one thing that had never failed him, his camera, to document whatever happened next. If he was losing his mind, at least he'd have evidence of his descent into madness. The October wind carried the scent of dying leaves as Marcus approached St. Catherine's Chapel at exactly 2 p.m. The statue stood unchanged, bronze arms still open in welcome or surrender. No one waited for him, but as he drew closer, he noticed something that made his breath catch. Fresh flowers had been placed at the statue's base. White roses, their petals pristine despite the October chill. He was about to leave when he heard footsteps behind him. You came? Marcus turned to see an elderly woman, perhaps 70, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and eyes that seemed to hold decades of secrets. She wore a simple blue coat and carried a worn leather purse that looked like it had traveled many miles. Are you the one who texted me? I am Sister Catherine Moreau. I've been watching you, Marcus Chen, since the night you kicked our Mary. Her voice carried a slight French accent, refined but warm. Sister, Marcus tensed, you're a nun? Retired. I taught theology at the university for 42 years before the diocese decided my ideas were too progressive. She smiled, and it was neither kind nor unkind, simply knowing. I've been studying phenomena like what you experienced for most of my career. Your case is particularly interesting because of your background, both your academic training and your personal history. I don't know what you're talking about. The woman in white. The security footage you've watched 17 times in the past 2 days. The dreams that wake you at 3 a.m. Dreams where you're falling through darkness until a hand reaches out to catch you. Marcus stepped backward, heart racing. How could you possibly know? Because I've seen her too. Sister Catherine's voice was steady, matter of fact. Not just me. Dozens of students over the years. Always the same pattern. A moment of crisis, an act of rejection or desperation, followed by encounters that can't be explained through conventional means. But you're different, Marcus. The evidence in your case is more substantial than usual. You're talking about hallucinations, mass hysteria, suggestive influence. Am I? Sister Catherine reached into her purse and withdrew a manila folder thick with documents. Sarah Kim isn't the only journalist who's investigated this. Look, the folder contained newspaper clippings spanning 30 years, academic papers, official reports, even police documents. Headlines varied, but the core story remained consistent. Students experiencing visions of a woman in white near the chapel, always following moments of profound spiritual crisis. Some were believers who'd lost faith, others were skeptics who'd challenged it. All reported the same figure, tall, graceful, wearing flowing white robes. This is mass suggestion, urban legend perpetuated by social media. Read the witness statements. Marcus reluctantly scanned the documents. The details were unnervingly specific and consistent across decades. Height, approximately 5 feet 8 inches. Hair, dark, shoulder length. Eyes, brown, with an unusual depth that witnesses consistently described as ancient or knowing. Clothing, white robes that moved without wind. Duration of encounters, between 15 and 45 minutes. Emotional impact, profound, lasting, transformative. But what really disturbed him were the dates. The earliest report was from 1987, long before social media, before the internet as he knew it. These couldn't all be copycat stories. This proves nothing, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps not. But consider this. You came here today, despite your rationalist convictions, because something in you recognizes that what you experienced transcends normal explanation. Your scientific training tells you to dismiss it. Your direct experience tells you something else entirely. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. My mother died in a church bombing when I was 12, killed by people who believed God spoke to them directly. If I accept that supernatural experiences are real, how do I distinguish between genuine revelation and dangerous delusion? How do I know I'm not becoming like them? Sister Catherine's expression softened. That's the right question, Marcus. And it's why what happens next matters so much. The distinction isn't in the experience itself. It's in what the experience produces. Does it increase love or hatred, compassion or judgment, humility or pride? What do you mean? She checked her watch. In approximately 4 minutes, based on historical patterns and certain atmospheric conditions, she'll appear again. Not to everyone, only to those experiencing genuine crisis of belief. The question is, will you run or will you stay and listen? Marcus laughed shakily, but the sound was hollow. You're asking me to wait for a ghost? I'm asking you to wait for an answer. But Marcus, before she comes, you need to know something about your mother's death. Something that never made it into the official reports. What are you talking about? Sister Catherine pulled out a worn photograph from her purse. It showed the aftermath of the bombing. Rubble, smoke, emergency responders. But in the background, barely visible, was a figure in white kneeling beside the wounded. This was taken by a freelance photographer who was covering the conflict. He never knew what he'd captured until years later when he developed his film. Look closely at the figure. Marcus squinted at the photograph. The figure was indistinct, but there was something familiar about the posture, the flowing white clothing. As if summoned by her words, the air around the statue began to shimmer. Marcus blinked, certain it was a trick of light. But the shimmer deepened, taking shape, becoming solid. The woman in white stood beside the bronze virgin, exactly as she'd appeared in the security footage. But now Marcus could see her face clearly, gentle, infinitely sad, and somehow familiar. When their eyes met, recognition hit him like lightning. She looked directly at him and spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the space. Your mother's death was not God's will, Marcus. It was evil, dressed in sacred clothes. Do not let their violence steal your capacity for wonder. Marcus's legs gave out. He crashed to his knees, camera falling forgotten to the grass, the photograph fluttering away in the wind. The woman in white stepped closer, her movements fluid and unhurried. Marcus remained on his knees, mind reeling between skepticism and terror. Every fibre of his being screamed that this was impossible, yet the evidence of his senses was undeniable. "This isn't real," he whispered. "Stress-induced hallucination, grief response, neural misfiring triggered by emotional trauma." "Your scientific training serves you well," she said, voice gentle but clear. "But it also limits you. Tell me, Marcus, what would constitute proof of my reality? What evidence would satisfy your rational mind?" The question caught him off guard. Even in his state of shock, the philosopher in him recognized the sophistication of the inquiry. You're asking me to define evidence for the supernatural? I'm asking you to think like the philosopher you are. If I were a construct of your mind, would I challenge your preconceptions so directly? Would I ask you to question your own experience rather than simply accept it? Would I present you with logical paradoxes that force you to examine the very foundations of your epistemology? Marcus struggled to his feet, academic training kicking in despite his shock. A sophisticated hallucination might. The mind can create convincing self-doubt as easily as false certainty. Schizophrenics often report voices that challenge them in complex ways. She smiled. The first time her expression had shifted from profound sadness. "Excellent. Now tell me, what do you remember about the night your mother died? Not the official story, not what you've told yourself for 13 years, but what you actually experienced?" The question hit like a physical blow. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. You've spent 13 years building an identity around that tragedy. Rational atheist, objective skeptic, challenger of religious superstition. But what if the story you've told yourself isn't complete? What if there were elements to that night that your trauma-shocked mind couldn't process? I was there. I saw the aftermath. 17 people dead because someone thought God told them to plant a bomb. Yes, evil disguised as divine mandate. But what else did you see that night? Look deeper, Marcus. Past the smoke and the screams and the blood. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering. The explosion had torn through the church during evening prayers. He'd been waiting outside, sulking because his mother had insisted he attend services when he'd rather have been home playing video games. The blast had thrown him to the ground, deafened him temporarily. When he'd staggered to his feet, the building was collapsing. Nothing else, just death and destruction. Look deeper. Against his will, memory surfaced. Fragments he'd buried so deeply he'd forgotten they existed. In the chaos following the explosion, as he knelt beside his mother's body in the rubble, someone had knelt beside him. A woman in white, not a nurse, not a first responder, who'd placed gentle hands on his shoulders and whispered something in a language he didn't recognize. When he'd looked up through his tears, she was gone. "You," he breathed. "I tried to tell you then what I'm telling you now. Evil does not represent the divine any more than darkness represents the sun. Your mother's death was a human tragedy, not a theological statement. But if you're real, if this is real, why didn't you save her? Why didn't you stop them?" For the first time, the woman's composure cracked slightly. Pain flickered across her features like shadow across water. "Because I cannot violate human choice, even when that choice leads to terrible consequences. I can offer comfort, guidance, hope, but I cannot force people to choose love over hatred, life over death." Marcus felt 13 years of carefully constructed certainty beginning to crumble. Then what's the point? If evil can triumph, if good people suffer while their killers claim divine sanction, what's the point of faith at all? Faith isn't about preventing suffering, Marcus. It's about finding meaning within it. Your mother died protecting 3 children she shielded with her body. That choice, her choice, was more sacred than any building. The statement hit Marcus like revelation. He'd never known that detail. Official reports had mentioned civilian casualties, but not specific heroic acts. How could you possibly know? Because I was with her when she made that choice. And I've been with those children every day since, helping them grow into adults who choose compassion over vengeance. One of them became a doctor. Another teaches refugee children. The third started a foundation that builds schools in war-torn regions. Marcus stared at her, world tilting on its axis. You're asking me to believe in guardian angels. I'm asking you to believe in love that transcends death, in goodness that persists despite evil, in the possibility that your mother's sacrifice created ripples of hope you've never seen. But the rational explanation is that you're having a psychological break brought on by stress and unresolved trauma. Yes, I know. The question is, which explanation serves truth better? The one that reduces all mystery to neurochemistry, or the one that allows for experiences beyond current scientific understanding? Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing. Finally, if I accept this, if I accept you're real, what changes? Everything. Your thesis, your career, your understanding of reality itself. But more importantly, your relationship with your mother's memory. You've been carrying her death as proof that the universe is meaningless. What if instead it could become proof that meaning persists even in the face of evil? And if I reject this, if I choose to believe you're a hallucination, then you'll find ways to rationalize what you've experienced, and we'll respect that choice. But Marcus, her voice grew urgent. Your mother's last words were about you. She said, "Tell my son that doubt is not the enemy of faith. It's the pathway to mature belief. Tell him to keep asking questions, even the dangerous ones." The words shattered his remaining defenses. They were his mother's exact words, spoken in Arabic, which he'd never shared with anyone. Not his father, not his therapists, not his closest friends. "She's proud of your questions," the woman continued gently. "Your refusal to accept easy answers, your determination to protect others from the kind of hatred that killed her. But she also wants you to know that not all seeking leads to emptiness. Sometimes it leads to fullness beyond imagination." Marcus wept without shame, 13 years of grief and anger pouring out like water from a broken dam. When he finally looked up, the woman was fading, becoming translucent. "Wait," he called. "I have more questions. I need to understand." "You always will. That's what makes you a philosopher. But now you have a different kind of question to pursue. Not whether mystery exists, but what to do with mystery once you've encountered it. How do I know this isn't madness? How do I know I'm not becoming like the people who killed my mother?" "By their fruits, Marcus. Your mother's killers believed their violence was justified by divine command. Does our conversation inspire you toward violence or toward love? Toward hatred or toward healing?" She was growing fainter, but her voice remained clear. "There's something else you need to know. The bombing that killed your mother, it wasn't random. Your family was specifically targeted because of your father's work translating ancient manuscripts. Documents that revealed how certain religious texts had been deliberately mistranslated to justify violence." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father is in danger, has been for 13 years. The same group that killed your mother has been hunting him. They've found him, Marcus. You have 48 hours. That's impossible. He's been in witness protection since... Protection that's been compromised. Check your email. Sarah Kim has been investigating more than just your story. She's uncovered connections between the bombing and current threats against Middle Eastern scholars. Your father's identity has been leaked." Marcus scrambled for his phone, fingers shaking as he opened his email. There it was, a message from Sarah Kim with the subject line, "Urgent. Your father may be in immediate danger." The email contained documents Marcus had never seen before. FBI reports, intelligence briefings, photographs of his father taken just days ago outside his apartment in Montreal. The photographs were stamped with yesterday's date. "How could you possibly know this?" Marcus whispered. But when he looked up, the woman was gone. Sister Catherine approached from where she'd been standing at a respectful distance. "She told you about your father. You knew?" "I suspected. The timing of your appearance here, your particular crisis, it fits a pattern. Often these encounters occur when someone is needed for a specific purpose." "What purpose?" Your father has been working on a translation that could expose how religious violence has been orchestrated for decades. The same manuscripts that got your family targeted 13 years ago. But he's lost heart, Marcus. He's considering abandoning the work because he believes it cost him his wife and destroyed his son's faith. Marcus stared at her. You're saying this is all connected? My mother's death? My crisis of faith? This encounter? I'm saying that sometimes the patterns of the universe are larger than we imagine. Your mother's killers wanted to silence your father's work. Instead, they may have created the very person needed to complete it. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized but hadn't spoken to in 3 years. His father. Marcus? His father's voice was tight with fear. I need to see you. Something's happened. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about your mother's death. As Marcus listened to his father's voice, he felt the last of his certainty crumble. The woman in white had been right about his father. Right about the danger. Right about things she could not possibly have known. Either he was experiencing the most elaborate and specific hallucination in psychiatric history, or the world was far stranger and more purposeful than he'd ever imagined. And in 48 hours, he would have to choose which reality he was willing to live in. Marcus drove through the night to Montreal, his father's urgent words echoing. There are things about your mother I never told you. If I don't tell someone soon, I'll take them to my grave, and her sacrifice will be meaningless. Dr. Kamal Chen lived above a Lebanese restaurant, walls lined with books in Arabic, English, and French. When Marcus arrived, he barely recognized his father, once tall and dignified, now shrunken and aged beyond his 60 years. Baba, Marcus said, using the Arabic word he hadn't spoken in years. My son. Kamal embraced him. You look like your mother, especially around the eyes. They sat drinking tea from glasses his mother had brought from Lebanon. 13 years of unspoken grief stretching between them. Tell me, Marcus said finally. Kamal withdrew photographs from a wooden box. The first showed ancient script. Your mother wasn't just a teacher. She was one of the world's finest translators of ancient Aramaic. She was working on first-century texts hidden in a Syrian monastery for 2,000 years. Texts containing versions of religious stories that differed significantly from official church doctrine. What kind of differences? The kind that challenge assumptions about divine revelation, about whether violence could ever be justified in God's name, about whether religious authority comes from institutional power or love itself. Kamal showed another photograph. Marcus's mother standing beside the woman in white, both bent over an ancient manuscript in what looked like a library. Marcus's hands trembled. When was this taken? 3 weeks before she died. Your mother said someone visited who helped her understand deeper meanings. Someone who knew details about ancient languages, not recorded anywhere. You believed her? I thought it was stress hallucinations. But then she came home with translation insights no human scholar could make, knowing historical contexts documented nowhere. Kamal produced a journal. She kept records of these conversations. Marcus read a random page. She appeared again today. The woman in white speaks Aramaic like a native, with an unplaceable accent. She understands nuances suggesting she was present when these documents were written. When I asked who she was, she said, someone who was there, someone who remembers what really happened. Marcus looked up. Why didn't you tell me this before? To protect you. After she died, I burned most research but kept copies hidden. I thought the danger had passed. But it hasn't. Yesterday, someone broke into my apartment. They left a message. Finish what your wife started and join her. What do you want me to do? Help complete her work. These translations could change how the world understands religious violence. You have her intellectual courage, her willingness to ask dangerous questions. Marcus closed the journal, decision crystallizing. Show me the manuscripts. Working with his father over the next 24 hours, Marcus began to understand why their family had been targeted. The manuscripts weren't just academically interesting. They were revolutionary. Look at this passage, Kamal said, pointing to text they'd been working on for hours. The standard translation reads, Blessed are those who take up arms in righteousness. But your mother's notes suggest something different. Marcus studied the ancient script, comparing it to his mother's translations. She's changed take up arms to lay down arms. The difference is a single character in the original Aramaic. A single character that changes everything. Instead of blessing fighters, it blesses peacemakers. Look at when this mistranslation was standardized. 1195, the same year Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade. Marcus felt a chill. Someone deliberately altered it to justify holy war. And it wasn't just Christians. Similar alterations appear in Islamic and Jewish texts from the same period. Someone was systematically corrupting religious teachings across multiple faiths to promote violence. They worked in silence, Marcus understanding the scope of his mother's discovery. Document after document revealed the same pattern. Ancient texts preaching love and tolerance systematically altered to promote hatred and war. "There's something else," Kamal said finally. "The night your mother died, she called from the church. She'd found proof of something that would change everything. An original 1st century manuscript written by someone who claimed to be an eyewitness to gospel events." An eyewitness to what? To the appearance of divine figures. But according to this manuscript, these weren't supernatural beings. They were travelers, beings from outside our normal understanding of time and space who appear during crises to guide human development. Marcus's worldview tilted. "You're saying Mom found evidence that religious encounters might be alien contact?" "I'm saying she found a document suggesting the line between spiritual experience and encounters with non-human intelligence might not be clear. The manuscript describes beings with technology that appears miraculous but follows natural laws we don't understand." "And this manuscript was destroyed in the bombing?" "I assumed so. We never found it." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Sister Catherine. "The manuscript your father mentioned still exists. Meet me at the university library, rare books section. Come now. You're running out of time." As they drove toward campus, Marcus processed what he'd learned. "Dad, what if the woman who helped Mom wasn't supernatural, but exactly what that manuscript described? Someone from outside our normal understanding of reality?" Kamal was quiet for a long moment. "Then your mother died protecting the most important discovery in human history. And now it's up to us to finish what she started. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses." The university library's rare books section was nearly empty at 10 p.m. Sister Catherine waited in a climate-controlled reading room, handling a document case with extreme care. "Dr. Chen," she nodded to Marcus's father. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your wife's work deserves to see light." Kamal's eyes widened as he recognized the case. That manuscript was destroyed in the bombing. Someone removed it 3 hours before the attack. Someone who knew what was coming. Sister Catherine opened the case reverently. Inside lay sheets of papyrus covered in ancient script, preserved under glass. "This is what your mother was translating when she died. But there's something impossible about it. Carbon dating puts it at 50 CE, yet the paper shows no aging. The ink appears fresh." Marcus examined the extraordinarily consistent script. "A forgery?" "Read it first, then decide." Sister Catherine produced his mother's translation. "I write this for those who will question what they have seen. On the 3rd day after the teacher's death, she appeared to his followers, not as a ghost, but as one who had travelled far to be present. She was tall, graceful, with dark hair. Her white clothing shimmered with its own light. 'I am not from your world,' she told them, 'but sent by those who watch over consciousness development throughout the cosmos. Your teacher's message represents crucial human evolution, but already those in power seek to corrupt his words.' She showed them visions, future times when the teacher's message would justify war and hatred. This must not be allowed. Truth must be preserved for those with eyes to see. She spent 3 days teaching them to distinguish revelation that comes from love versus deception from power's desire. Others like her would appear throughout history, always in crisis, always to truth seekers despite danger. We do not come to be worshipped, but to preserve compassion's evolution. We are older siblings in consciousness's family, helping younger siblings choose love over fear. She warned, those who use our appearances to justify violence will find we withdraw. We come only to healers, never to harmers. The test of revelation is not supernatural origin, but whether it increases love in the world. Marcus looked up. This changes everything. If authentic, it suggests religious experience might be contact with advanced consciousness, natural in ways we don't understand. But why haven't they prevented more religious violence? Marcus asked. Sister Catherine smiled. Perhaps forced evolution isn't evolution. If they prevented mistakes, we'd never learn to choose correctly ourselves. Marcus's phone rang. Sarah Kim. Marcus, the building is surrounded. Armed men. Someone leaked your location. Get out now. Through windows, Marcus saw dark figures crossing the campus quad. Service tunnel to the steam plant, Sister Catherine said urgently, moving toward a concealed door. But we need the manuscript. If they get it, 13 years of your mother's work dies. As alarms blared, Marcus faced his mother's choice. Preserve truth or preserve life. He grabbed the manuscript case. Let's go. The service tunnels beneath Millbrook University were a maze of pipes and conduits lit by emergency lighting. Marcus carried the manuscript while Sister Catherine led them through passages she knew from 40 years of studying phenomena the church hierarchy ignored. Behind them, footsteps echoed. Their pursuers had found the entrance. The manuscript? Is this really what Mom died for? Marcus asked as they hurried through the labyrinth. Your mother believed this document could end religious wars, Kamal replied grimly. Prove that beings people call angels are actually advanced consciousness trying to help humanity evolve. At a three-way junction, Sister Catherine consulted a hand-drawn map. The woman who's been appearing to you, she's here, in the tunnels. She's been protecting us, redirecting our pursuers. The familiar shimmer materialized ahead. The woman in white appeared, more solid than before. You must hurry, she said. They have orders to kill you and destroy the manuscript. They've also captured Sarah Kim. She's discovered connections between your mother's death and a network of extremists spanning multiple countries. Why take Sarah? Marcus asked. Her research threatens to expose the Purification Council's funding sources and political connections. The woman nodded to Kamal. I tried to warn your wife about the bombing, but she chose to stay and protect the manuscript, believing it would give your family a chance to complete her work. Now you have the same choice, she continued. Escape quietly or risk everything to expose the truth. Marcus looked between his father and Sister Catherine. If we expose this, what happens to religious violence? It doesn't end overnight, but it creates cracks in the foundation of justified hatred. It gives peace seekers ways to challenge those who use faith to promote war. Voices echoed closer. Commands shouted in multiple languages. We split up, Sister Catherine said. I take the manuscript to the academic underground. You rescue Sarah and expose the council. The woman in white smiled. I can get you into the chapel undetected. Consciousness is more flexible than most realize. Sometimes it's just suggesting someone look in the wrong direction. Sister Catherine, take the manuscript, Marcus decided. Dad and I are going after Sarah. Mom died for this truth. I won't let anyone else die for it. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Marcus realized he'd stopped questioning the woman's reality. Real or not, she was helping them save lives and preserve truth. Sometimes, that was enough. The chapel basement was carved from ancient stone, predating the university by centuries. The woman in white led Marcus and his father through an impossible tunnel connecting to the foundation. Sarah is being held in the old priest's study. 2 guards outside, 1 inside, she explained. They're trying to convert her to their philosophy, that some truths are too dangerous for public knowledge. She gestured for silence and walked through the wooden door like mist. Marcus heard Sarah's defiant voice. You can kill me, but the information is already uploaded to cloud servers. A heavily accented man replied, Miss Kim, we don't want to kill you. We want you to understand why your truth is dangerous to human society. The woman reappeared. I'll create perceptual confusion among the guards. You extract Sarah. Seconds later, confused voices echoed, Did you hear that? There's no one there. Marcus and Kamal slipped past the bewildered guards. Inside, they found Sarah facing Father Martinez, who was speaking about faith requiring mystery. Truth is what makes faith meaningful, Marcus interrupted, not comfortable self-deception. The woman in white materialized beside the priest, invisible to him. Tell him truth and wonder can coexist, she instructed Marcus. Marcus found himself saying, What if the sacred is bigger than our understanding? What if truth reveals deeper mysteries rather than destroying them? Father Martinez stared. You sound like your mother. She said truth was larger than any single category could contain. Footsteps thundered above. Their pursuers had found the chapel. There's a passage behind the altar, Father Martinez said finally. But promise me, don't let scientific materialism become just another fundamentalism. I promise. As they escaped through the cemetery, the woman told Marcus, You've learned to navigate mystery with both intellectual courage and spiritual openness. Sarah checked her phone. The research is uploaded. By morning, the world will know about the Purification Council and the corrupted religious texts. Marcus felt peace with uncertainty for the first time since childhood. Some questions were invitations rather than challenges.